Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for one of my favourite kinds of PC build? The price to performance, do everything, but on a little bit more of a budget. I mean, this graphics card alone, the brand new 4070 Super, costs around about $600, and we recently did a gaming PC that cost less than this for the whole PC by quite some margin. You can find this video in the top right corner of your screen. But obviously the performance of this means it's pretty much going to be perfect for everything, be it 4K gaming, 1440, high refresh, the lot. And I'm also really pleased to say that we've finally got our hands on the Montech Very Heavy. Not its official name, this is actually called the King 95, and this is a chassis that starts from around about $110, but has this very cool curved panel on the front. So join me as we go through all of these components, walk you through everything that's great, maybe some things that should be avoided or improved, put it all together in the easiest way possible, and then of course show you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers so you can see exactly how well this thing performs. I don't know what's happened to my voice. Let's just move on to a quick word from this video's sponsor. MSI's jaw-dropping RTX 4080 Super Expert is here, and I mean just look at it. It is stunning. With a finely crafted metal body and timeless design, this card is sure to be the centerpiece of your rig, featuring a pass-through cooling layout to ensure gaming stays cool and quiet. Not only that, but thanks to the power of Nvidia's Super Series, you're fully equipped for ray tracing, DLSS super resolution, and frame generation. Learn more today with the link down below. Let us begin then by discussing our new graphics card, the RTX 4070 Super. And I know I'm a little bit late with this one, I was ill, like leave me alone, I'm sorry, I'm allowed to be ill every now and then, and we haven't covered this yet. And essentially this actually takes the same price point as the old 4070 Super, so you can get these from around about $600. It doesn't specifically have to be this palette Jetstream one, by, you know, whichever one you fancy, whichever one's on sale, to be honest with you. And this is going to give you better performance than the 4070, maybe around about 15%, but it is going to depend on the title and the circumstance and whether your CPU bottlenecks, of course. Only thing to be aware of is that it only has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which I think is going to be absolutely fine for the next couple of years. Then you're going to need to turn some textures down a little bit later than that, which if you're the sort of gamer that does like to upgrade your graphics card every 2 or 3 years, then it's not really going to be a big deal. But be aware, if you go for AMD, you can get cards that have 16 gigabytes of VRAM for actually a fair bit less money. But obviously those don't have such good ray tracing, which, to be honest, in 2024, if you are spending this sort of money, I know there are loads of people that don't want to miss out on those features. And I'll also say that I'm very conscious of things today because I had a nasty comment yesterday that said,
"Oh, Centric, why don't you actually do something? All you do is stand there and talk."
So I'll start building this PC just for you, shall I? By talking about the sort of ethos that we're doing here today. I realise I say I'm going to do something and then I start saying I'm going to talk. Maybe that is the offering. Maybe he's got a point. We're going to go for Ryzen. This is a B650 motherboard. This is the Pro RS from ASRock. This is not going to be a particularly high-end board. We don't have like B650Es, so we're going to miss out on PCI Gen 5 for graphics cards and things like that. And indeed, in the flesh, this definitely isn't the most sturdy feeling thing in the world. But at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it is a motherboard. How many people actually pay that close attention, really? It's still AM5. You can still put like a Ryzen 7 7800X3D at a later date, and it should be absolutely fine. You've got really strong I/O on this actually as well. I mean, loads of USB on that. It does also have this heatsink for your blazing M.2 for a Gen 5 drive, and pretty much it's just gonna work. It's not gonna have loads of crazy features. It's not gonna have the absolute best sort of power delivery for like crazy overclocking or anything like that. It's a motherboard. It's going to work, and it supports AM5. I will confess, though, that when it comes to the processor, this is a little bit of an experiment, and the reason I say this is because this is only a 6-core chip. This is the Ryzen 5 7600, and I do think that grabbing a 7700, or if you're really high-end, a 7800X3D will obviously make more sense. But the price of this at the time of filming is around about £190, whereas a Ryzen 7 is about £320, which is huge. And especially if you're playing at high resolutions and you're not playing games that are being bottlenecked by that CPU, then it's a great way to save money, and it is literally the difference between you going for like a 4070 or a 4070 Super. So I'm going to prioritize GPU performance over CPU here, but if that's a mistake, we'll see a little bit later in the video. Just pop the top on your socket, line this up gently. Oh, Don't worry, it's fine, it's fine. If this does happen to you, just gently lift it up from one side and then lower it back down until it is safe and secure. Should be absolutely fine. I mean, sockets aren't the sturdiest things in the world, I mean, especially the pins, but generally speaking, as long as you're not sort of like dropping something on it or like poking it with a screwdriver, you should be okay, but obviously do sort of work with the largest amount of care that you can. In terms of the memory or the RAM that we're using, today it's from G.Skill. This is some Trident Z5. We used this loads of times on the channel before, and it's very easy to install. Just line this up with the socket. You will have to move these pins forward like I have done already. There's only one right way to put it in, and then once that is the case, obviously just push it home till both of these clips are in place. I assure you it is very straightforward, and it's satisfying. Up. Up. Okay, maybe I should stop throwing stuff around. I mean, people have told me to stop doing that, and that's the reason. Someone did say, though, that the good thing about watching these videos is that they see that the hardware is sturdier than they otherwise thought. But next up, it's storage. This is from Lexar. This is the NM790, and I assure you this will still work. It's intact. Don't worry, it's solid state. No moving parts. Well, not by design, anyway. And I must say that this is probably the best SSD that Lexar has actually made. They have traditionally been a little bit late to the game, but as I say in every video, don't specifically look for, say, this one, just make sure you're getting a good deal on whatever's on sale at the right speed. As for the next step in our journey, you are going to want to grab your CPU cooler, and you will get one inside the box with this 7600, which is fine, but I mean, if you're going to present it in such a nice chassis, you don't want to be using the stock cooler. Even air coolers, as we saw from our H6 Flow video, you can find that in the top right corner of your screen, didn't really look quite right with an air cooler, so I would advise that you look at an AIO, but as we're trying to save some money, we're not going for anything crazy. So from Cooler Master, it's the PL360 Flux. But the reason I want to grab this now is because it's always easier to sort of check your mounting now before you put this inside the box. So if you need to do something a little bit different, it's easier, as I say, to do it now rather than when it's in the chassis. But actually, to be fair, it looks as if we're using the AMD hooks. So everything that we have, we are going to use. So we can actually pop this back for a second and then talk about arguably the star of the show, to be fair, because I saw this at Computex last year, and a lot of people really excited about it, myself included. So yes, this is the King 95, and you can buy this version, which costs about $150, which has a load of RGB fans as standard. That is a really nice thick piece of glass, actually. And the thing with Montech cases is traditionally they tend to be really well priced, but then maybe, I don't literally want to say rough around the edges, because clearly they're not, but there's always a way that they save money, so sometimes panels and things are a little bit thinner, and you know, like tolerances maybe aren't quite there, but this has to be like very similar actually to the height cases, especially this bit. That's very reminiscent of that, and I'm not getting any sense of sort of poor quality whatsoever. I mean, quite the opposite. Compared to most cases that I've built in, this seems to be right up there with some of the best. It's all completely toolless. It's very, very secure and solid, and I love the fact that you do get all of these fans if you go for the RGB version. It's a shame this isn't toolless though. Let's just remove these two screws then, and then that swings off. So you can take the whole thing out or leave it like this, which is pretty cool. It does seem as if there's an addressable RGB hub at the top on this particular version, but one of these cables has come slightly loose from where it's hit this door. So that's an easy fix. It's looking pretty nice. It still has that classic Montech thing that annoys me though, where you've got their sort of logo as this plaque. Montech, if you're watching, the logo is a little bit plain. It just says Montech. Like, you'd be better off having just this triangle there. That would be better. And you do also get this huge light bar all down the side here as well. I think you get that on both versions. USB Type-C, you've got two USB-A's here as well. But if you want to go above and beyond, they do also include a mesh panel inside the box as well, which would go where this glass is. But I actually would say Montech would have been better off to just not include that and lower down the price by, you know, another $5, $10 or whatever it would be. Because surely if you're going for a chassis like this that has all of this airflow, you don't need any more, but maybe Montech know better than me. But let's proceed and actually get stuck in, shall we, by putting this under our overhead. Picking up our motherboard. Of course, it does have an I/O shield, so nothing to whack in the back. So everything lines up, and these little standoffs here, this central one actually kind of clips the motherboard into position, and then you need to use these screw holes here to get everything safe and secure. Oh, look, they've actually learned from Phanteks, and they've got all of these labeled screw boxes here as well. And not only does it say the type of screw, but it actually says what it's for, look. SSD or motherboard. Well done, Montech. Right, and once that is done, you should then be left with what is looking like a pretty cool gaming PC. I must say, I'm a big fan of myself here for matching this color RAM with the rest of the board. I think that's really gonna work, and it does give you a little bit more interest. I've done various builds before where you do like full white in black chassis, and I don't really think it works properly unless you've got something to tie it all together. But a little bit like this just gives it a bit more interest, and I think this is gonna look pretty darn tasty. Getting everything plugged in is actually pretty straightforward. This is our USB 3 just below this very large ATX connection. Just pushes in like that. Below that we have our USB Type-C, and as I say, not reversible, so if it doesn't work the first time, maybe give it a spin and try the other way. Yep, there you go. The front panel is the bottom right of the motherboard, it just hooks on like that. Addressable RGB is down at the bottom, as of course is our HD audio all the way at the bottom left. You also have this little 4-pin fan cable here as well. This is going to control the whole hub, so all of the fans in our system. We're going to connect this right at the bottom where it says SHFAN 4. I think I am going to take this door off though, because it is annoying me. Oh. I will say, by the way, that I tried to take this panel off, which obviously I've now done, and I do have a feeling it's going to be a bit of a nightmare to get back on. Just saying. To make our life as easy as possible, we are going to move on to the power supply now. This one is also from Montech. They supplied this along with the chassis itself. It's called the Century 5, and again, this is one of the price to performance sort of pieces of equipment you can get for a gaming PC, this one being the PSU. And this is an 850 watt unit, which is actually overkill. The 750 would be fine, but I do always say you should spec your power supply slightly higher than you need it in case you want to make any upgrades. And I know Montech's quite new, but this one does come with a 5-year warranty. It's also got a 12-volt high power connection, which is perfect for today, because it means we don't need to sort of worry about using any of those horrible adapters if you're going for any of these new NVIDIA cards. And because it's fully modular as well, nice and small, it should fit into most chassis and give you a nice, tidy build. But make sure you have the fan facing outwards so it can actually breathe properly, and then just gently slide that into position. Screw it into place, feed through, and then plug in our 8-pin at the top left of the motherboard for the CPU. There is also another 4-pin as well, but we don't need to worry about that unless you're using like a really high-end Ryzen CPU, like a 7950X or something like that. You're just not going to have to worry about the power delivery there. And then we do also have our ATX, which, as I say, you really can't miss because it's huge. Just tuck this through, and then again, give that a nice push and a click till it's in position. Right then guys, I now think it's time for my least favourite bit, which of course is the cooler, or specifically, the radiator. And as we know on the channel,
I hate radiators.
mainly because they're faff, they take ages, but the end result is good. But they take ages. Let's grab this one out of the box. Our AMD mounting hardware, fans. And it does actually look as if we can take this bracket out, which is nice, and then the whole radiator will fit to this, and then you can put the whole unit back in, and it saves yourself a fair bit of faff, assuming you've got it around the right way, because of course fans can blow one way or the other. So if you want to use it as an intake, make sure that's what you've set it up for, so you don't do the classic PC-centric thing of screwing all of the fans in, thinking it's great, putting it in, and then either the cables are facing the wrong way or the fans are blowing the wrong way, and you have to start again, and it takes you an hour, and it should have only taken you about 15 minutes.
I hate radiators.
So mapping it out then in almost our 3D space, we want to grab that bracket, put it on top of the radiator, and then move the fans below it. If it seems complicated, maybe I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. But look, once you've then flipped that over, you know everything is in the right position. So you can then put all of your fans going the exact same way, and you shouldn't be left with any disappointment. So screw these down into position, then screw the bracket onto the radiator. The 3 fans can then connect to this little splitter, so the one CPU header on your motherboard is going to control all of them. And then, assuming you have done everything right, in theory, the whole unit should now gently go back into position. It would be easier if this went down from the top, to be honest, but hey-ho. Right, future markers here. I think I've been a bit silly. I think I've done the mount the wrong way. I think you can actually like drop it down into position because pushing it up just didn't work. There was clearance issues. But as soon as I sort of took everything apart and started again, it does seem as if putting the bracket in from the top down actually seem to have worked. So I've done this the traditional way of literally just screwing it in from the side, and then this leaves us with our lovely cooler installed. But this is a classic example of why I hate radiators, to be honest with you. And Carl can now give you a compilation of all of my noises. Why? Why? What has happened? Oh, I don't know what the hell that was, but that's not good, is it? Radiators suck. But once you have proceeded to stop having your little tantrum and have got everything fitted properly, it's then just a case of getting your RGB plugged in. And actually with this cooler, it should work quite well because we have some free slots on this RGB and fan controller. I have moved some of the existing ones over to the left so the cables will reach, but should be as simple as just plugging our 3 addressable RGB fans in. And then once that's complete, you will of course need to get your pump head and mount that to the board. And to do that, you are going to need these little AMD brackets that you get here. Just grab your pump head, your little bracket, slide that on, and then you need a tiny little screw that comes in the box. And you feed this through and use your SSD screwdriver just to secure that down into position. Then you need the little AMD hooks, feed that through the hole, screw it in with this very large nut. Do the same with the other side, and then grab some thermal compound, and then gently put like a pea-sized amount in the middle. That's probably a little bit too much, but with Ryzen, it's better to have a bit too much than a bit less. Then carefully, with the whole unit, line up the top hook first. Sometimes it's easier said than done. Then just move the lower half into position so that it's over, well, the lower hook. And then it's just a case of screwing it down evenly on both sides until it's safe and secure. I would recommend, by the way, that you do actually do this with the whole case lying down flat, as it's a lot easier to get that even pressure. Right then, are we about there? I think so. Progress has been made. The cooler actually doesn't look too bad, to be fair. It's a decent value option. As I say, it's nicer than having like a big air cooler would be in here. But I think it is time for the star of our show, which is, as of 4 weeks ago, new RTX 4070 Super. As I say, this is the Palette Jetstream edition, and if it was me, I would look to get like the most RRP card you can, as long as it has 3 fans. Obviously, it's always worth checking for reviews and things, but this generation seems to be so power efficient that they've overbuilt a lot of these coolers, and it's not actually necessary to keep these like super cool and quiet, so you find that even the cheaper ones do a very good job. This one, I'm not sure I've actually used before though. I mean, definitely not this exact card. It almost is kind of the same as the Founders Edition in the way when it comes to that color scheme, because this is literally all like decked out black. That looks pretty darn cool. It's going to work in this chassis for sure, right? Obviously, you do have this 12-volt high power connection on the top, standard across the new 40 series range, bar the 4060s. But you will want to grab yourself a screwdriver and remove slots 2 and 3. Then you can pick up your brand new RTX 4070 Super and then line this up with the slot. That was the dust filter there being removed. No issues at all. Oh, there we go. And then push it down till it sort of clicks into position. I think we just need to finish this off by screwing this in, feeding through and then plugging in our Gen 5 connection to this GPU. Slightly fiddly, but as I say, please make sure you get an audible click and then you know it's secure. And then I think the very last thing to do is to grab this little SATA connection here that's going to be used for our fan and RGB hub and just give that some power. And then I see just one more cable to plug in, which is actually for our pump to function. It's a 4-pin, looks the same as the fans. This plugs in at the top right of the motherboard, just about here. I'll show you around the side actually first so you can see, with basically no cable management whatsoever. You've got this dual chamber design and everything is very sort of neatly organized here. It's really, really easy to build in actually. It was just my mistake with that sort of top radiator bracket that made this more difficult than it needed to be. I love this hub at the top here. It's going to be really useful if you are going to use other ARGB devices. But if you are going to go for a high-end build, I would actually suggest that you get the base version of this and like go for either Lee & Lee fans, Thermaltake interlocking, Corsair, any sort of like fan system that actually has like a separate box and they interlock, because that will be far, far easier. And actually on that point, this is the first Montech case I have used where I would say the quality is up there with some of the best. If you're wanting to put like an RTX 4090 in this, I wouldn't say you're going to have to compromise. It's only really these fans that I think look a little bit cheap. Like, I'm sure they're going to be fine, and once they're spinning you won't see the logos and things like that. And it is nice to have that hub, but that's the bit that makes it feel a little bit cheaper for me. everything else, honestly, I've really enjoyed. So let's see if this works and get some games on it. We will, of course, be needing a keyboard, mouse, and, you guessed it, the PC-centric mouse mat, available to purchase with that link down below. But then here comes, if I can find the power button, the moment of truth. We have noise. Certainly looks and sounds promising. Actually, there's two of these that don't seem to be lit up very well, nor this top piece either. So there is some work to be done, but it appears we do actually have some readout on screen, which is pretty cool. It certainly looks as if it's working. I'm glad, because I didn't want to have to take this one apart. I'm a bit confused about the RGB though, because everything is definitely plugged in, so it might just be that it only likes these Montech fans, maybe you've like overloaded it or something. It's not the end of the world. I can use a splitter and get everything actually connected to the motherboard, or use the Cooler Master one that comes in the box. But I don't know, watch this space. Oh, right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another classic PC-centric, say one thing and then sort of change his mind slightly later. I mean, I still really like the case, but I've noticed three issues. Firstly, my review sample that granted was like first off the production line, maybe not literally, but you get the idea. It seems as if the ARGB hub has indeed got a problem. All of the fan bits of it seem to work, but some of the RGB lighting, I couldn't get it to work. The only way around this was to use like a splitter cable, and then everything is like tickety-boo, dandy, great. But I mean, yeah, that's a bit naff that the ARGB hub doesn't work properly, which is one of the big features of this. Secondly, and it's a bit hit and miss, but when you take this glass panel off, and then you go to put it back on, just be aware sometimes it does catch slightly on this glass here at the top. It is okay, but I don't like the fact that it rubs up slightly, like the tolerances could be a bit better there. And then also around the back, that little panel piece that does like slide out, please don't take that out, because it was a right nightmare to put it back in. It's doable, but it's a pain. But then the problem is, if you leave that in there and you just sort of hinge it round, it makes building your PC just that little bit more tricky. So it would have been better if there was like a tool-free or at least an easy way of taking that out. I understand it's got a hinge in it, but anyway, that is the story. But otherwise, genuinely still very happy with this chassis, for the money especially. But I probably would just say, just buy the base version and just don't worry about all of the extra fans. You don't need all of them anyway. And if you are going to do something that's a bit more high end, you can swap them out for something else. But we do get a double peel here today. Part 2. Let's get on with the games. And to kick us off, we're going to begin with some Hogwarts Legacy. And as you can see, Editor Carl has rather helpfully moved us along to a more intense part of the map. I know you guys were saying,
Oh, why are you just doing it round Hogwarts?
well, now you can rest easy. Editor Carl's got your back. And interestingly enough, this is running at the Ultra preset, but we don't have any ray tracing enabled at the moment. So this is at 4K DLSS balanced, no frame generation, and we're getting around about 80 frames a second or so. So this is going to be a really nice way to play, actually. I mean, we do have 12 gigabytes of VRAM, so definitely not the highest amount out there. But for Hogwarts Legacy, as long as you've got more than 8, you should be okay. You can always tailor down the settings a little bit if you need to. But I am interested to see how this will cope at 1440p. Oh, yes, that's right, I see. Don't forget, of course, that this is a very CPU-demanding title. And actually, it seems as if we were hitting a CPU bottleneck, which is probably why we were getting a couple of dips every now and then. Because if you look at our GPU utilization, we're now only rocking about like 80, 85%, and it does dip every now and then a little bit further down as well. So clearly, this is one of those titles that if you did want to step up to like a Ryzen 7700, or of course a 7800 X3D, then you would get better performance in Hogwarts Legacy. But of course the question then becomes, does it actually matter? Because if you were to spend all of that extra money, would you really be gaining extra frame rate that you would really notice in a title like this? Because I mean, about 80 FPS is probably all you need for this anyway. So you'd be paying a lot more money for a higher frame rate, but then not necessarily any tangible benefit. I don't know, let me know down in the comment section below. So we've reverted back to 4K now and have now enabled ray tracing at the Ultra preset. And that latency has gone, well, it certainly spikes anyway, all the way up to 70 milliseconds or so. So this is actually a significantly worse experience now. Oh, that was good timing. I think we've crashed. We have crashed. Oh, don't tell me it's crashed again. What is it with this game? So let's try it for a third and hopefully final time with DLSS performance, and then all of our ray trace settings we're set to medium. And it does seem like a case of so far so good when it comes to not crashing, but again, that latency for me is just too high, and I don't really understand why it's like that, really. I don't know if it's something specifically about Hogwarts Legacy, but you think this is supposed to be like a really powerful graphics card, and indeed it is. So the fact that it can't handle ray traced medium is a bit funny to me. I know Nvidia will probably say this isn't aimed at 4K gaming, but then it's not really 4K gaming, is it, if you're using DLSS performance anyway? I'd go as far to say that's actually a little bit disappointing. So let's just try one final thing and set the ray trace quality to low. Oh, has it crashed again? If it's crashed, I'm not doing it again. Ah! Nope, not doing it. So let's move swiftly on to a title that frankly I'm a lot more interested in anyway. This is some Cyberpunk 2077. Of course, it's Nvidia's like star child. They love this thing. It keeps getting updated with more and more Nvidia features. And what you're seeing here is actually running at the Ray Traced Ultra preset. And DLSS is set to automatic by default. So this will be performance, but again, don't want to sound like a broken record. Especially in Cyberpunk, the DLSS is really good here. And I think if you are playing at 4K, performance is absolutely fine. And this is a prime example of why things like Hogwarts Legacy do wind me up, because if you get something that's optimized, then it just runs really well. Because in this title, we're getting around about 36, 40 milliseconds of latency whilst recording, and ray tracing is set to ultra. I've never been a fan of what Hogwarts Legacy have done with their ray tracing. It was broken for the first few months when you were testing it, as like everything was like the wrong color anyway. When everything is working properly, you can get an experience like this that's perfect. I mean, even at 4K, which once again, this is not strictly aimed at, but my opinion is if you're spending £600 on a graphics card at least, then yeah, you probably are going to want to be able to play at any resolution. But it's nice to see that you can do it. Remember, of course, that you do also have DLSS 3 frame generation, which we can turn on. This will give us a little bit of a boost to the overall smoothness of the image, but it will increase the latency slightly. So having a look now, you can see we're now at that 60 millisecond mark, so I would want to turn some of the settings down slightly. But I do want to see what happens if you play this at 1440p and with path tracing. And then let's see what we got. I would actually expect it to be slightly lower than what we had before, but it actually appears is that higher? That is quite something. I know we do have DLSS 3 enabled as well, but yeah, we're now getting about 110 FPS. The latency is ever so slightly too high, which is a little bit annoying. I've got the DLSS manually set to balance because it's 1440p. I wouldn't want to change this down to performance. I'd probably just stick with the ray tracing on the normal setting, to be honest, unless you're sort of just like wanting to have a drive around and sort of explore the city or so. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is an FPS, so you do want it to feel nice and swish. But this is very much on that cusp of it is fine, but I think there'll be certain instances where the latency will get a little bit too high and it just won't feel quite as smooth as you want. But this is when it is pretty impressive that you can get this graphics card that can sort of punch above its weight and really play with the big boys. So yeah, as long as you're happy not necessarily to use the absolute highest settings, 4K, 1440p, this system is pretty bliss. But okay, enough talk about all this single player malarkey. Let's do the important stuff, the multiplayer. And we're going to begin with our Apex Legends test. This is, of course, the game that I played so much of. I'm out of touch now. I'm an old man. I need to get back into it, really. I've moved on to F1 and I got addicted to that. But that's a side story for a different day. As you can see, this is currently running at really high frame rate, actually. This is currently sitting at about 155, 170 FPS, which would be pretty cool anyway if it was 1440p, but it's not. This is 4K, and obviously I don't really recommend people focus on 4K gaming for multiplayer because it makes far more sense to go for a higher frame rate and get the latency down as much as possible. But there are 4K 240Hz monitors that are coming out. I mean, this is 4K 120 and this looks and feels stunning. There's perfectly legitimate reasons to play at 4K. I mean, you do get extra details, so if you're someone that like wants a large view distance or something like that, it is going to help you, but it's certainly not necessary. If you are more of a 1440p gamer though, then you'll be glad to see that your frame rate will increase even further, as we are now comfortably getting over 200 frames a second. The latency hasn't changed drastically. It's gone from about 14 milliseconds to, what's that, about 10 or so here. And that isn't going to make like a huge difference, but ultimately as long as you've got like a decent set of peripherals, a good monitor, I mean you could go 1440p, 240 or even 360, I think you'll really be able to get the most out of this system. Just obviously be advised that it's not the highest end in the world. You're not going to be able to get like 500 FPS in every single multiplayer title, but certainly something like Apex you're going to run with ease. Now I'd say that Apex Legends is one of those titles that's almost in the middle, so let's try something a little bit more intense with some Halo, and this also doesn't have any sort of like scaling or anything like that, no DLSS. There is like dynamic resolution scaling you can use, that does actually work quite well, but here we're just running this at native 4K ultra settings with ray tracing disabled. And to be fair, it does actually run quite well considering. I mean, it's not as high as we were getting in Apex Legends, it's still about 85 frames a second or so, so under 100 FPS. Another prime example of why you would want to lower the settings down, mainly that resolution. But it's still cool that if you are going to play like the campaign or something and use a controller, then by all means just turn it up, because it's not the end of the world. I actually played this game similar sort of settings actually to this on was it a 3080 Ti, and I just set the minimum frame rate to be 120, and that seemed to do a really good job, as it kept the resolution as high as it could be while still maintaining that frame rate. But let's see what happens when we turn this down to 1440p. I am expecting a big increase, and indeed a big increase we're getting. That wasn't very nice. Around about 145, 150 frames a second or so actually, which obviously is going to be way, way smoother. It's going to function a lot better on most people's monitors, which I'd say, what, for this sort of level, 1440p, 165 Hertz is probably going to be quite common. And actually the dynamic resolution scaling on this game is so good that it's not actually that noticeable that we've turned the resolution down. I don't really understand how it does it, but I mean, more games need to have this sort of integrated. It would still be nice if we had DLSS, because that probably would look slightly better, but the fact that it isn't really noticeable at all, I think is pretty darn tasty. And the game feels really responsive as well. In terms of thermals and acoustics, we're currently looking at around about 59 degrees on the GPU and 49 on the CPU. Bit of a noise test for you. Basically inaudible. I haven't even tuned this and it just sort of works really well out of the box. This is overkill. You do not need a 360 rad for a 7600, but as I say, if you are going to pair it with this chassis, there wasn't actually a big difference between the 240 and the 360, so it made sense to go for the 360. Oh! I get too annoyed at this. It seems like Fortnite's the only game that I'm actually good at when it comes to multiplayer. Anyway, that's another rant for a different day. All in all, I think this system is pretty cool, actually. I think it gives you all of the horsepower that you need without going into that like really crazy expensive territory for something like a 70 Ti, 7900 XT, XTX, anything like that. I will say that the trade-off with the VRAM, I think is going to cause you some problems eventually, whether that's in a year's time or 4 years' time, we're not entirely sure, but if I was spending £600 on a graphics card, I would want it to have at least 16 gigabytes of VRAM personally, but then you do get all of the benefits of the... I was distracted by the fact that I was going to move the mouse and the mouse is on the floor. You do, of course, get all the benefits of things like DLSS 3, better ray tracing, and you could also say that if you're spending £600 on a graphics card, you want it to be able to run ray tracing really well, and I'm still not convinced really that the AMD cards, when it comes to latency, necessarily do like a amazing job at it. Like, it's fine, you can use it, but clearly the Nvidia cards are going to be better. As for the rest of the system, obviously the case is the star of our show. It's definitely quite unique, and if you do go for that base version, then the price point is awesome. It's a shame that my RGB hub didn't function properly. I don't think you'd be running into this issue. Obviously, if you have the same thing, then it can get replaced, or like the whole chassis, which would be really annoying, would get replaced. But yeah, I still think go for the base version and maybe go for like Lian Li fans or something, because while you won't get as many for the same money, I think all in all it sort of ties in a little bit better, and it will give you less cables and things to organize, or just like don't go with any, because the airflow on this is clearly overkill anyway, so it's not necessary. But I really would love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you make of this system? Do you love this chassis? Do you love this graphics card? Or do you think both could be improved? We'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this. Get yourself subscribed. There's a very cool budget PC build coming very, very shortly. That's like the cheapest I think we've ever done. You're gonna love it. Get subscribed for that. And of course, if you do want to check out current pricing on literally anything featured in this video, then as always, you can find everything listed down below with our affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not bask in the radiance of MSI's RTX 4080 Super Expert? This metallic graphics card brings a whole new look to PC gaming, with a finely crafted aluminium die-cast casing and cooling galore thanks to the Flow Frozer thermal design. It's got crazy performance in the latest ray trace titles and can even be overclocked with ease thanks to MSI's Afterburner software. Learn more today with the link down below. But thank you so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.